Welcome to the Python course, and in this short course you are going to learn everything that you need to know as a beginner in Python. We are going to cover some advanced concepts, but to be honest, let's just get started. So to get started with programming in Python, there is just a couple of things we need. First of all, we need a Python installer and we need some kind of code editor. In this case, I highly recommend Visual Studio Code as it is one of the best code editors. So if you go to the description down below, there will be a link for you, or you can just copy this from the screen, and all you need to do is literally just press download for Windows. I am assuming most of you guys are on Windows. If you're not, you can actually still download this on a Linux or other systems. You just need to go to the installer and I'll tell you what to do. So download for Windows, it should start an install, as you can see, right? Now all you need to do is literally just double click it, run it, accept the agreement, press next. You don't need to create a start menu folder. If you want to, you can do that. I would recommend a desktop icon, and to be honest, just copy what I have, right? I do recommend add to path, next, install. Once this finishes, you should be able to launch Visual Studio Code. In the meantime, what we can do is we can head to python.org. So if you type python.org, so once you're on python.org, all you have to do is you have to come to downloads, click Windows right here on the top. And here, what you need to do is you need to download Windows Installer 64-bit, right? So just press this, go to desktop, save on your desktop, and you should get basically the same installer like you had with Visual Studio Code. As you can see, Visual Studio also has finished, so it's actually just make sure it doesn't launch so it doesn't disrupt our installation. Okay, so basically the installation is as simple as Visual Studio Code. You just double click it, run it. Now here, make sure that you press add Python exe to path, right? And if you press install now, this will basically install Python for you and you should be able to program in Python in a second. As you can see, the setup was successful. Right, so to get started, there is just 3 things that we need to do. Open up Visual Studio Code, and on the left hand side you have a couple of options. The options you're interested in is Explorer and Extensions. Click Extensions, type in Python. You should get 3 or 4 extensions. As you can see, Python environments, pylons, Python, and Python debugger. I'm pretty sure if you install basically 2 of these, the rest is going to get installed automatically. But if it doesn't, make sure that you install Python environments, pylons, Python, and Python debugger. Also, another extension that you need to install is CodeRunner. This makes programming so much easier, right? So make sure that you also install CodeRunner. As you can see, it has 40 million installs, which probably just gives you an idea that it is pretty useful. Once you have installed everything, go to File, Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, and type in Run Code, or type in the hotkey Ctrl-Alt-N. As you can see, it should give you an option. It says Run Code, and it should give you this key binding Ctrl-Alt-N. What you need to do is, I do recommend, obviously, if you want to keep it to this key bind, but I don't like it as it's technically very demanding, I would absolutely change it to, for example, something like F4. However, there is other keys with F4, but all you need to do is literally type in F4 and just delete any additional key binds that are assigned to F4. Right? So for example, close window is Alt F4, that is okay. But if anything else with is, for example, with F4, just delete it. You can literally press delete and it should be okay. Okay, let's actually start programming. Right, so to close this window, as it is a bit annoying, literally just press Extensions and press Explorer. Here, what we need to do is if you press File, Open Folder, go to your desktop, and here what I recommend doing is creating a new folder. So just name it Python 2. For example, in this case, I'm going to name it Python 2 and just select this folder. In this case, I'm going to select this folder, select folder. Now, why are we doing this? Opening up a folder in Explorer, right, which is this option, makes it so much easier, as if I create any file, for example, hello.txt, it just makes the file with this extension, right? Whereas if you do it by hand, it might not work. Also, creating any folders or any files is technically very simple, and deleting any files is also very simple. As we can see, I have just deleted a file and I don't need to look for the folder. So let's actually make a new Python file that will allow us to write Python. So if you press this button which says new file, type in main.py. Now obviously make sure that you put py at the end, because if you don't, then it's not going to work. This is why I'm saying use Visual Studio Code, because it makes it so much simpler. Right, so if I type in print and I open up a bracket, a round bracket, and I put a double quotation mark, as you can see, the program by itself, it closes. Why does it do that? Because if I don't close it, as you can see, now it becomes an error. So this is a good rule in programming that I have made by myself, and it should be studied by universities worldwide. When you open something, you need to close it, right? So let's actually close it back again. And as you can see, it works. If you put hello, my name is William and I am 30 years old. If I press, now remember the keybind I told you to change or keep it as original? If you press it, it actually shows you the output of this code that we have put. And also it actually tells you how fast your code is. Now, I also have forgot to mention that you can zoom in and zoom out. This is extremely important for any recording. So if you actually go to view, appearance, and as you can see, it says zoom in and zoom out. There is a keybind. This is control and equals mark, or control and minus. If you have numpad, you just need to press the big plus button or the minus, which is right above it. And this should zoom in and zoom out. Just a cool trick I have for you. Now, let me just show you something cool, right? So if you type in print, if you open up the bracket, and if you type in 3 quotation marks, and if you press enter and you put 3 double quotation marks again, as you can see, it still works. So now what we can do is we can actually put multi-line text. So for example, let's type in hello, my name is William. Right? Now, if I save this and I press F4, as you can see, it basically runs with multi-line. Now, this is usually used for either in tools, it is just to display, for example, what the tool is called, or some cool hacker ASCII text, but this is not really useful in programming. Right, what we can also do is we can actually print out text as a variable, right? So for example, I'm going to specify text equals, and I'm basically going to copy text, right? So let me just take text, there we go. And I basically copy it, right? Now, as you can see, it's like a big line, but that doesn't really matter. You can obviously cut this down, but we're just going to leave it like this. Print text, right? And this is actually going to print out the whole blob of text, as you can see, right? So this is just a quick, simple way if you want to store text in the code and you just want to print it out, right? Like without having to play around with it, right? So you can just copy, paste, and print, right? Just a simple way to paste something. Right, so let's actually write some code. If you type in name equals input, and if you basically type in just enter your name with a colon and space at the end, this will make it so much nicer. Now let me just break this down, what this means. Name is our variable. We need to specify variables whenever you want to process something or do something, right? As you'll learn that later in the video. Input just basically means input from the user. Now, if I press F4, I'll ask you for your name. However, you will not be allowed to put your name. What you need to do is come to File, Preferences, Settings, and type in Run in Terminal. This should give you an option saying Code Runner, Run in Terminal. Just select this and close it right here with this X button. Now, if I basically enter my name, as you can see, I am allowed to enter my name. I can run this again and it says enter your name. If I put William, it hasn't done anything. Now you might be confused. Why is it not outputting a message to me? Well, the reason is because we don't have a print function. So whenever you want to print something, you obviously need to use a print function because the program doesn't know what you want it to do. And additionally, the program may just think, okay, maybe you don't want an output. So we just need to basically say print name, right? This is also important that you actually put the correct variable, right? Also, name doesn't work. It needs to be the same with the capital case sensitivity. Now, if I run this code again and I put my name, so if I put William, As you can see, it hasn't outputted. Well, that's actually interesting. Why has it done that? Right, I have found the solution. I haven't saved, right? So anytime you modify the code, make sure to save it, right? I forgot to save. To do that, you can literally press Ctrl and S, which saves the file. So if I press F4 again, as you can see, it says enter your name. So if I type in William, as you can see, it has outputted a message to us. Now, as you can see, this is filling up pretty quickly. To clear this, you can literally type in CLS. And as you can see, it clears the screen. Okay, so now since you understand what is a variable, we're going to talk about data types. Data types are very important because they are the base or the fundamentals of programming. So let's basically specify some variables. Name equals William. Now, whenever it comes to handling text or strings, you actually need to put it in double quotation marks or in quotation marks, right? It doesn't really matter. It's personal preference, but I like to use double quotation marks for text. Let's specify age. Let's do 30. Now, when it comes to integers or numbers, you don't need to specify double quotation marks. Now, let's put my favorite number, and let's actually put a variable with underscore. So when it comes to naming your variables, it is basically a free market or free world. You can do whatever you want. However, as a personal experience, I do recommend setting them to something that you understand straight away. Because when it comes to thousands and thousands or hundreds lines of code, you need to understand what you're coding or you're gonna get lost very quickly. Let's put my favorite number, which is 1337, but with a decimal in between. And let's put driver equals true, right? These are called data types. Now, we haven't specified data types yet, but I'm going to show you what they do and what they actually mean. Okay, so let's actually talk about data types. So as you can see, name is a string. You've heard of a string before because I've mentioned it in this video. As you can see, string is text, and this is a function to call it. Age is basically a number. Integer is age, right? Age is a whole number because you can't be 30.5 years old, can you? I mean, you can, but we don't really say it like this. So it'll be an integer. Now, a number, for example, maybe a total at the supermarket might be like $51.98. So in this case, your total, or basically a number where it needs to be exact, would be a float, right? As you can see, I have put the integer, but that is because for demonstration purposes in a second. And driver, as you can see, it says true, which is called boolean or true false or 0 and 1, and some other examples, but let's just stick to true false and 0 and 1. Now, why have I put integer into the float value? This is important where you need to understand data types, because as I'll show you in a second, if I run this code, as you can see, it says 13. Now, why does it say 13? It says 13.37. This is why I'm saying it's important, because if you use integer, it's going to cut off the decimal point because integer is an integer, float is with decimal point. So let's actually change this to float. Now, if I run this code again, right? As you can see, it says 13.37. So this is, as I said, very, very important, especially when handling money or important data. It is important that you put the specific data types and correct data types. Okay, let's talk a little bit about operators. Operators are very, very important because this is how we control values, right? Or basically programming. So as we can see, we have plus, minus, star, and slash. Now, I'm not going to obviously explain what star and minus does. Obviously, I think this is common knowledge. Obviously, minus and plus takes away or adds. Star is multiplication. The division is slash. So if you want to divide something, you use a slash. Then we also have operators like equals equals, exclamation mark equals, greater than, less than, or for example, greater than or equals to, which means it's arrow and equals, right? So in this example, I want to show you a basic usage of if statements, and basically we're going to write a program that checks if you're able to drive a vehicle. Right, so let's write a simple program, right? We're going to write as follows. We're going to make a variable called age, which is going to ask for an input from the user. So enter your age. There we go. Then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to do an if statement, right? Because we need to control it somehow, and we can control this by checking with an if statement. So if age, now we actually have to specify that this is an integer value or we're going to get an error. If age greater or equals to 18, colon at the end, print you are allowed to drive a car. Okay, then else, which basically means if anything else, if it's anything below 18, display this message. Okay, so we're going to do you are not allowed to drive a car. Okay, now obviously make sure to save this because I did a mistake 2 seconds ago. I did not save the file and the program was okay. So let's save and run this program again. Let's put 15. As you can see, it says you are not allowed to drive a car. Let's try this again. Let's put 23. As you can see, it says you are allowed to drive a car, right? Now, what we can also do is we can actually put a range on this, right? Because let me tell you, if I run this program and if I put 150, yeah, I'm allowed to drive a car, but at the same time, there is not a person that is 150 years old. So let's actually make this a bit more detailed. So what we're going to put is we're going to put an operator called AND, which as you may think, it just basically means yes, and also this statement I want to be included in this program. So we're going to put int age, and we're just basically going to copy equals to, or sorry, other way around. There we go. Is it? I made a mistake, I think. No, it's other way around again. Seriously, I keep forgetting. 65 and a colon. Okay, so now if I run this program, it should be a bit more detailed. So let's try this again. So let's put 150 again. As you can see, it says you are not allowed to drive a car. However, if I put 65, as you can see, it says you are allowed to drive a car. Right, if I put 35, I'm allowed to drive a car, right? So as you can see, this program is much more detailed now. Well, obviously, we can ask more questions like, what kind of license do you hold? Do you have a truck license? Do you have a motorcycle license, right? And stuff like that. Obviously, the limitations is your mind, right? You can do whatever you want. Right, let's do some error handling, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put a float value. So let's put 10.5. As you can see, it gives us an error. So what we can actually do is we can actually take this float value and still accept it, right? This is important because obviously you never know what users can input, and especially when it comes to security, which we shouldn't really worry about now. It is important that you do verify what the user is inputting or entering, right, into the program or website. So let's do as follows. Let's put a new variable called number, which is going to be a float value. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to convert a float value to integer, right? This is the simplest way that we can really do this. Then what we just need to do is we literally just need to change it into integer. And if you change the number to integer, then all we need to do is change the number, right, into a number. So let's actually run this program again. So if I run this to 10.5, as you can see, the program is working. Now it says you are not allowed to drive a car. If I run this again, if I put 60, let's do 35. As you can see, it says you are allowed to drive a car. Now, just a reminder, we are inputting a float value, right? As you can see, it works. Now, let me just break this down how this works. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking the age, right? We're taking the age. Then what we're doing is we're creating a float value of age, right? This is also where programming starts to make sense. It should start to make sense. As you can see, we're basically passing a variable through another variable, right? So this is how we convert values very easily. And this is, I think, the simplest example I can show you when it comes to processing stuff. So age is being entered, then the age is being processed by a float value, which means the value, it will be over forever. Whatever the user inputs, it'll be the float value. Then the float value is basically just being changed into an integer, which means any float value, it doesn't really exist anymore because now we have a integer. And the integer obviously is getting checked by the program if you are a certain age. And there we go, we get our answer, right? I hope this makes sense. This is, I think, the simplest way I can explain this, and I hope you guys understand this. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to write a program that converts kilograms to pounds and other way around very nicely, right? And this program is actually a very great opportunity to learn how to write simple programs. What we're going to do is we're going to type in option, right, equals input. And we're going to type in enter. Actually, let's please select between 1 and 2. I don't know what's wrong with my keyboard. It's not really working with me today. Maybe it's angry. Right. Anyways, let's write 1 kgs to lbs, right? You can obviously do this any way you like. I'm going to do it like this because I'm a very, someone called me a master of simplicity. I guess that is true. lbs 2 kgs. And let's keep it like this. Let's keep this spaced because it just makes it a bit easier to look at. Then what we're going to do is we're going to type in, actually, one more thing I forgot. Make sure that you obviously put integer, right? So let's keep this integer and let's close this. There we go, right? Remember, when you open something, you need to close it, especially in this case, this is actually a perfect example, right? As you see, I closed it here, right? Let me show this again. As you can see, it looks like this. Now I'm going to type in integer. I'm going to open it and we need to close it here, right? So remember, right? You need to always look at where to close this. You can't close it. I mean, you can't really close it anywhere else, but you always need to close it whenever you're programming. Just close it at the end, right? That's basically the simplest explanation I can do because this is still like one statement. Okay. Now let's ask the user for an option. If option equals to 1, then what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user for the weight. So integer, let's actually keep it float, right? And then we're going to do input. Okay, I'm going to close this and we're going to type in, please enter your weight. Okay. Now what we just need to do is we need to do the mathematical operation. So we're going to do is weight equals weight times by 2.2. That's actually fine, right? That's fine. And then if you type in print lbs, and then what we just need to do is literally just pass the weight value, and that is it, right? So if I actually save this program and I run this program, I'm going to select 1, I'm going to put 100. As you can see, it is a little bit messy, right? There is an actual easy fix for this. So if we actually round this to a 2 decimal point number, comma, right? And let's just close this again. Remember, closing, very important. Let's save this again. So I saved the program. Let's press F4, 100. And as you can see, it actually rounded it perfectly. Beautiful, right? Now let's literally just program the second option. So if option equals to 2, my keyboard is really not working with me today. Float. Let's do it other way. Input, there we go, like this. Please enter your weight. There you go. And we just need to literally copy this, right? So weight by weight. Now here, instead of multiplication, because we're converting it from pounds to kilograms now, we just need to divide it by 2.2. And then print lbs, right? Sorry, kgs. And basically round to weight and then comma 2. Now you may ask, why am I putting 2 here? Basically the round function, basically you just need to let the round function know how many decimal points you want to round it by. So in this case, I'm just putting 2. And then if you literally just write else, right? So if you input anything else, you need to display this. Please select between 1 and 2, right? And that is technically it. This program will absolutely work beautifully. So let's reset the screen. Let's try F4, 100, beautiful. Now this is a problem is because I didn't put elif. There we go. So if I write 100, there we go. If I select the second option, 100, as you can see, it's working beautifully. Right, however, we can actually make this program a little bit better, right? So let's actually type in .strip, which basically prevents any white space from being entered by the user. Then if I do .lower, basically, which converts all text or the user input to lowercase characters, which is very important. As you'll see in a second, it is actually crucial because without it, the program is not going to work properly. And then what we just need to do is if option in, and we just need to specify our options right here. Now, not in squiggly brackets, but in standard brackets. And basically if I enter like so, kg, right, comma, kgs, and we're going to allow another option of 1. Let me actually explain why it is important that we have .lower. So as you can see, it says kg and kgs. Now I have entered this in lowercase characters. Now you might ask why. Because to prevent any issues from the user to enter, for example, if they enter capital K's, we would have to actually program or tell the program that, okay, if someone's going to enter this, do this. But just to prevent any problems, we're just going to take any user input and we're just going to automatically convert it to lowercase, right? So then if the user input doesn't matter what the input, it is still going to work. Then if you do weight equals float, right? So just standard thing we just done 2 seconds ago, right? So let me just do the same thing. Enter your weight in kgs, right? Then we need to take the weight equals weight, multiply this by 2.20, and then just display the weight, right? So if I save this and I run this program, as you can see, it has displayed. Now it is a bit messy, but we can obviously round this. So if I do weight round, do this again, 0.2, close this again, I run the program again, it'll actually, as you can see, now it's working. Right, let's actually add a little bit of text. So let's add LBS like this. Boom, now this is gonna work and look way nicer. I just wanted to add a colon here. Right, so if I do 100, as you can see, it has changed. Now we can literally just copy this. So we're just gonna do elif option n. Literally just add another option. So LBS, and we're gonna add 2, right? I missed something, there we go. Because of my microphone, I can't see the keyboard, so that's why I'm a bit typing, like I can't see, because I can't see, literally I can't see. I'm guessing it's right, and then enter your weight in LBS. Okay, that's fine, and then we just need to literally convert everything, right? So weight equals weight. Now here, as I said, it is the best to change your variables to something different, especially if you're using for the same function. So let's just convert this to weight 2 and let's display the weight, right? So let me actually copy this so I don't have to type this out. There we go. Weight 2 to 2, there we go. And let's do kgs. Okay, right, let's run this program. Let's clear the screen. Let's run this program. There you go. As you can see, it's working beautifully, right? Obviously, if you want to change it, then you can change it, right? I'm just going to keep it like this. There we go. Beautiful. And let's just add the last option, which is just in case you put something that you don't recognize, then please enter a valid option. Okay. So now if I enter, for example, 4, as you can see, it doesn't work. Right. Let's make a simple calculator that will basically add 2 numbers together. So let's type in num1, num2, and then what we're going to put is we're going to put float input, and we're going to write enter your first number. Then we're just going to literally copy this, and we're just going to change the text to second number. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to make a third variable, because we actually need to display the value, and the easiest way to do this is to make a variable that is going to add 2 values together. So if you make a sum equals num1 plus num2, right? And if you print the sum, it should work, right? So let's save the program and let's run this. So let me actually fix this. This is annoying me. There we go. Space. There we go. Run this again. There we go. So let's do first number. So let's do 15 and let's do 35.5. Right, as you can see, the value is correct. Now, as an example, sometimes you might want to calculate a length for something, and we can actually do this with a simple function called len, which is available in most of programming languages. So let's actually ask a user for their name. So we're just going to enter your name. We're going to put a colon and space per usual. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to write this name equals len name, right? This basically tells the program that I want you to take the name, calculate the length of the name, right? Now it doesn't really sound beautifully in English, but it makes sense in Python. And what we can do is we can literally just print it, right? So if you print name, if I run this program and I type in Alexander, as you can see, it says 9. If I type in anything else, let's type, for example, Donald J. Trump. As you can see, this is 14 characters. Okay, so let's actually get into a bit more fun side of programming. So if you type in import OS, and then if you type in os.system, and if you put who am I, this will actually allow you to run a system command. Now let me just break this down what this means. Import means you're importing a package. In Python and actually other programming languages, I'm pretty sure JavaScript as well, allows you to import packages or extensions to your Python code. Now these extensions give you additional functionality. For example, later on I'm going to show you how to import Flask, which allows you to write website applications. Right? So OS stands for operating system. So basically here, what this just tells you is we're importing the operating system, which allows you to run system commands. Then if you write OS, right? So this makes sense. We have to connect this together. os.system and who am I? Now, if you run this command, this will actually allow you to display your hostname and your user, right? Because this is what the command does. Now, the good thing about this is you can actually run this command on Linux as well, as this is a universal command regardless of your operating system. Now, what we can also do is we can do joint commands. So for example, if I put dir and ampersand with ipconfig, this will actually make a joint command and it's going to run two commands at the same time. So as you can see, this is my folder. So this is a dir, which stands for directory, and ipconfig, which displays my internet adapters or my IP addresses. Now, these are my private IP addresses. These are not my public IP addresses. So you can actually show them all you like, as long as you're not connected to some SSH server or some other server. Now, obviously, I don't think I need to say this. Beware that you shouldn't really paste anything here in this payload, because you can obviously compromise your system. So be careful what you're sending, right? Obviously, just trust what you type in. Don't trust other people. Let's write some lists in Python. So if you type in list equals, and if you open up a bracket with a double quotation mark, let's type in apple. Then if you put a comma, double quotation mark again, banana, right? And let's just basically complete this process till you have 4 entries. So let's write pear, and let's write pineapple. Now you can actually write whatever you want here. Just make sure that they are separated with basically within double quotation marks and with commas, right? So literally just copy what I have. So you have 4 different items. Then what we can do is we can write print and list. Now this will actually print the whole list, right? So if I run this code, as you can see, it has printed out the whole list. Now let's get into a bit of a different scenario. Let's say that this is a website application and you want to print out the user's data. What we can do is we can actually specify what we want to print out. So if you put 0, right? And if you press F4 or you run the code, this will actually print out only one entry or one item. Now you may also notice that it says 0. The reason it says 0 is because in programming, we start from 0. 0 is an actual number, and whenever you want to print something, you actually have to print it from 0. So if I put 1, this will actually print the second entry, right? As you can see, it printed out banana. Now, if you want to, for example, select multiple entries, you actually have to print out 2 entries, right? So if I select 1, and if I press F4, as you can see, it has printed out apple and banana. If I change this to 3, I will change this to pineapple, right? Apple, pineapple. So this is basically listing and indexing, and I hope you guys understand this. Right, sometimes what you might want to do is you might only want to print out certain numbers of characters in a string or text, right? So we can actually do that very, very easily. So let's put text equals on our string. In this case, it's going to be hello. Then what we just need to do is print it, right? And then what we need to do is we need to put character, like the number of the character that we want to print out. In this case, I'm going to print out the first character, which is 0, right? So if I press F4, as you can see, it's H. Now you might be confused. Why did I just put 0 and then printed out the first one? This is because in programming, 0 is actually number 1, right? Number 1 is number 2, right? So let's do that. So 0 is H, so that's number 1, right? Let me actually write this down so it's a bit easier. So I'm just actually going to write this down so it's easier. So 0 would be H, right? 1 would be E, and then, for example, 2 would be L, right? And so on and so on. So if I do 1, it's going to be E. If I select the second one, it's going to be L, right? Let's save this. There we go. As you can see, it's starting to make sense, right? So whenever you're starting something, make sure that you always put 0 because 0 is the first character. What we can also do is we can print out specific characters from the string, right? So for example, if I put 0 and 3, this will give us a result of HEL, right? Which is basically the first 3 characters. Now, I'm not exactly sure why it's 0 and 3. Maybe I'm not understanding something because technically it should be 0 and 2 to print out the first 3 characters, right? But for some reason it's not. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know exactly. It's a bit weird, right? As I said, but if you do 0 and 3, it prints out the first 3 characters. Always remember to test out because without testing, you never really know what can happen or what the result is. So always remember to test your code. Right, let's do some file handling, and this is my favorite part of Python. This is what you need to do. Come to File, Open Folder, open up your Python folder, press this button over here which says New File, type in file.txt. Here, write literally anything. I'm just gonna do something like this. There we go. Just some gibberish. It doesn't really matter what you type in. Go to your main Python file, type in the following code. File equals open, and then specify your file. Now, I don't think I need to say this, and this is why I got you to open the folder. The file or your text file has to be in the same folder that your code is in. So these 2 files should be in the same folder. Now to read the file, we need to write print file.read, and if you put an open bracket, this will actually read the file. As you can see, it has read the whole file. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hello, I'm a hacker. Now, a good practice is also to close the file, right? Which basically prevents any issues, or basically just in case something goes wrong, your computer may run out of memory. So if I run this again, there we go. Now we have a proper code of reading files. Now the cool thing about this is if I change the contents of the file to literally just about anything, the contents of the output, or basically what the program is going to output, also changes. This is useful if you change the file constantly and you basically want to save time rather than editing the code. You can literally edit the file, which is also great for non-technical users if you want to basically allow them to change the contents of the file. Right, so now that we know how to read files, let's actually allow a user to input something to a file, right? So this is what we need to do. First of all, we need to pick user input. So if you take user input, so if you specify input, which you should already know, if I'm honest, enter your text, right? You can write whatever you want here, it doesn't really matter. Then what we need to do is we need to do with open, right? So we need to specify the file again, because I need to know which file you want to save it to. And then as file. Then what you just need to do is file.write. Now here is where we need to pass the variable, right? Obviously, if you don't want to write something like from an user input to the file, you can literally specify what you want to write. However, because I want to take the user input, I actually have to pass user input, right? Which tells the program, okay, there is a variable called user input. Anything that the user writes, just save it to the file, right? Now there is just an additional option that we need to do, which is if you actually specify here with a comma, A or W, it does 2 things. A stands for append, W stands for write. Now basically if you put append, let me actually demonstrate. So if I write hello, no actually, my name is William. As you can see, it says hello, my name is William. So basically it appends to the file. However, if you press W or you type in W, right, and I run this program again, I do hello, the file gets overwritten. Now this is important because if you mess up a database or something that has personal identifiable information, or PII, or also known as customer data or basically user data, and you overwrite this, then you might get in trouble. So it is very important that before you do something, you obviously understand what you're doing and you also test what it does. Right, also I just wanted to mention, anytime you append something to the file, right, so let me actually show you. I'm going to put hello from Windows, right? As you can see, it joins it together. So anything that you have previous in the file, it basically will join it together, and it doesn't look good. And especially if you want to have some data, then it's not going to be readable over time, right? So there is an easy fix for this, and this is actually universal for computing science. So if you type in file.write, and basically in quotation marks, if you type in backward slash, which is on the left side of your keyboard, and N. This basically tells computers to make a new line, right? So if you actually run this file again, this will actually make it, as you can see, more readable, and it basically makes a new line, right? So this is a simple trick, but this is universal in programming science, that if you want to make a new line, all you need to do is just use this, right? And boom. Right, let's do a little bit of a fun exercise. We're going to import a HTTP package that allows us to send a web request. So if you type in import requests, right, if I can spell it right. Now, for you, this may be a bit of an error. It might be like highlighted or underlined that is an error. That is actually not an error because we just need to install the package, right? So if it's an error, that means you don't have it installed and you just need to install it. You can install requests by typing pip install requests into the terminal, right? And this basically will install the package for you, and that is it, right? It should work. Now what we can do is we can specify a URL, right? So in this case, we're just going to do URL equals double quotation marks. And let me just pull up the the URL. There we go. Right, there we go. Now what this is going to do is basically it checks our IP address, right? Then all we need to do is we literally just need to send the request, right? So if you type in response equals requests.get, and then if you basically pass the URL parameter, right? And you print the response.content. Now, if I save this and I run this program, this is going to display my IP address. As you can see, it has displayed my IP address, which is 146.70, blah, blah, blah. Right, let's have a little bit of fun with using some packages. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some random numbers. If you type in import random, this will allow you to create random values. Then if you type in print, and then basically random.randint. Now what we just need to do here is we basically need to specify the range. So let's do between 0 and 500, right? Now if I let this code run, what this will do is it will basically give me a random number between 0 and 500 each time I run this code, right? As you can see, this allows me to run numbers. So whenever you actually want to send multiple URLs or basically display something multiple times or repeat something, you would actually use a loop, as this just makes it so much easier. So let's actually write a simple counter which is using a loop. So let's import time, which I'm going to explain in a second what it does. Counter equals 0. Now we're going to actually make a loop right here, while true, which basically means as long as the program is running, which basically can be forever, it can be for 15, 20 years. So as I said, as long as the program is running, which means while true, counter plus equals 1, which basically just means increment or add 1 to the counter. Then what we just need to do is we need to make sure that we put time sleep. This is actually very important that you do put this line, because if you don't, then you're gonna run into a simple issue, which I might show you. And then let's do print counter. Okay, so let's actually run this program. Now what this should do is it basically should every single second it should increment or add, right? And as we can see, it's running, right? So as you can see, it's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is going to go all the way to 50 million if you keep it running that long, right? So yeah, now the problem when I'm saying you need to put time.sleep is because if you don't do that, then you're going to get a simple error of basically this program going to about 1 million in about a minute. So I'm going to run this, I'm going to show you, right? As you can see, it's going this fast and it's going to go forever, basically, right? So it's important that you always check your program, right? I keep going on about the same issues, but this is how you program. You put something, does it work? Does it not work? If it doesn't work, change it, research, Google, research, implement it, and this is how you program, right? So in this case, we would have to use a for loop, right? So if you type in for in range, I can't see my keyboard. And if you type in, for example, 5, right? And you put a colon, which is very important. And you type in print, which basically here is what we need to repeat the amount of times. Let's do hello, right? So now if I press F4, as you can see, it has repeated 5 times. Now if I put 10 times, it's going to repeat 10 times, right? I'm not going to count this, but it is definitely 10 times, right? So this is how you can easily create a for loop, and this is usually useful whenever you want to repeat the same code or whenever you want to send multiple HTTP requests or something like that. What we can also do is we can basically take away from the loop so it only runs a specific number of times. So let's do for x in range, and if you specify here the details, 5, 0, -1, right? You'll understand what this does in a second. Now, if you do print x, and if I run this program, as you can see, it has went from 5 to 1, right? So basically, we have told the program to only run 5 times, and on every single iteration or on every single loop, basically just take away 1, right? So you would use this loop if you want to repeat the program to only run a couple of times. Now, obviously, what we can do is we can change this. So for example, if you want to say hello 5 times, you can literally put hello here and then run the code. Now, obviously, there's like 50,000 other ways that you can do this. I'm just showing you so you can obviously choose your own way, which you will do obviously in the future as you learn Python, because everyone just does the things their own way. However, the most important lesson here is called something indentation. If you actually remove the space, right, as you can see, there is space between the sort of wall of the Visual Studio Code and the print function. So if I actually remove this wall, the program sees this as an error, right? Which technically is, because in Python, you need indentation. So whenever you're using loops or if statements, you actually need to put this white space for the program to work. And I'm going to tell you right now, this solves 90% of the problems, just missing indentation, right? I've had so many problems where I basically didn't put indentation or I just done it manually and it solved the problem, and it solved most of the problems, right? So remember, put your indentation, the actual program or the code actually does it for you. So if I actually, after the colon, if I press enter, as you can see, the code literally does it for me, right? Remember about indentation. Right, so let's create a function. Function is like what it sounds like, basically allows you to call it whenever you want it, right? It actually rhymed, amazing. So let's import time, right? So we need to import time, which is very important. Then what we need to do is to specify a function, you need to type in def, which means define. Then you can literally call it whatever you want. I highly, triple highly recommend to call it something that is easily recognizable, right? Because the more lines of code you put, the easier it'll get lost, right? So as I said, put something very, very easy to understand. In this case, I'm just gonna call it, for example, loop, okay? Then what you need to put is you need to put the round brackets and a colon. Now, as you can see, this becomes a problem because we need to put something called indentation. Now this was a problem, but it's not anymore. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to call our function, right? So let's actually do while true, and let's call our function, right? Once you call this, it will actually run. But before you do this, I'm just going to put time.sleep just to save myself pain. There we go. And if I run this program, right, and as you can see, the program is running, right? Basically, this will run forever because of while true. So as I said before, while the program is running, use or call this function, right? And because we have specified this function, anything within define and print is going to get run, right? This is important. We can obviously add time sleep, like 1 second here. So this will basically slow down the whole program as long as you basically put everything in this loop. Right, running files in command line or Python code in command line, it is useful in certain situations, and sometimes for debugging or testing purposes, it is useful or faster to run in the command line. So click your file, press shift and right click, Review in File Explorer. Then what you get is you get your folder with Python files, right? Or a Python file. Then what you need to do is Shift, right click again, open command window here, drag this to the middle of the screen or leave it where it is. Then type in the following command, Python and your file name. In this case for me, it's main2.py. Now notice if you type in basically the starting or the full name of your Python file and you press tab, this will autofill, right? So if I press this or if I run this command, as you can see, it is running the code in a command line terminal. So if I press 1, as you can see, the code, it is still working, just like basically running in Visual Studio Code, but it is technically faster because this allows you to test faster rather than waiting for Visual Studio Code to run. I sometimes run this because it is just faster for me. Right, let's write a simple web application in Python Flask. So before we actually get started, you need to come to your terminal, type in pip install Flask. This will install a Flask framework for you, and boom, right, already have it installed. Head to your folder and go to your Python folder or create a new folder. It is important that you separate your basically Python code from your web application, right? Just to make your basically life easier and overall to make it easier for Flask. Create a new folder, type in web application. Inside this web application, right, we need just to create a new folder called templates. There we go. Okay. So head to Visual Studio Code, open up your new folder. We can actually close this. So this is our new folder, right? Inside your web application folder, type in main.py. Okay, so now you should have basically two files, a folder and a file. Now what we need to do is we basically just need to write a simple basic web application code. Right, so I'm going to copy this basic code, which you can do that, and I actually do recommend to copy it because it's a pain to write all of this. But let me just explain what all of this does. So the top line imports all dependencies and packages that are basically just required for Flask to work with basic requests. Right, and as you can see, we have app.root. Let me actually just run this web application so you guys sort of understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to change one. Right, so let's actually run our web application so you guys a bit understand how all of this works, because technically if I show you, it's going to be like 10 times easier. If you come to the left corner of the screen and the Explorer, if you press Shift and right click, Review in the File Explorer, go to your Python folder, web application, so go to your folder, web application, and press Shift and right click, open command window here. Now what you want to do is you want to type in the following command, Flask --app, your basically web application file name, run --debug. This will basically give you a message like this. Now what you want to do is you just want to copy this URL, go to your browser, paste this URL into your browser, and as you can see, anytime you actually refresh the website, you get some traffic, right? So these are your logs. This is useful for debugging, not really right now because there's nothing here, but it is useful. For example, 200 means okay, right? So these are actually HTTP status codes. I do recommend if you're going to do web application development or something related to websites, you need to understand all of these HTTP status codes. For example, 404 means not found, right? There's no favicon. Okay, now let's actually change all of this, or let me actually show you what all of this means, right? So as you can see, we have 200 okay working. So return basically gives you what is supposed to return upon when the user enters the URL, okay? Right, so let's actually change. So let's write render template, open the brackets, quotation marks, and let's write index.html. Now go to your templates folder, right click, new file, index.html, right? Make sure obviously the files are the same as what you have put in the code. If you don't do that, the web application is actually going to crash. Now let's just write some basic HTML, right? So I'm actually going to just write some gibberish. So write head, let's write title, hello, right? And then let's write after head, let's write body. Then we're going to write H1, we're going to write hello, my name is William. Now remember to save this file, go to your web browser, refresh, Now, it is a bit glitchy. I don't know why it's not really cooperating with me today, right? But as you can see, it's working, right? So if you sometimes just press enter and it should work, right? Like right now, as you can see, it's glitchy. I don't know what the problem is, but it's not really working today. But it does work, right? So as you can see, I'm refreshing and it's working, right? So as you can see, hello, my name is William. The cool thing about HTML files is you can actually edit them, right? So for example, my name is Cool Kid. And if I actually refresh the website, as you can see, because this is a static file, it doesn't really cause any problems. What you should definitely avoid is changing the source code of the website, so the overall code of the website, in a live production environment, because this can cause a lot of problems, from crashing the website to corrupting data to corrupting user data. That's like all the things you want to avoid. So if you're making any big changes, just put a maintenance mode and then literally change it, like change the website. Don't do anything that you didn't really want to do. Right, so let's make another URL, right? So if you type in app.ru, and let's actually just call it testing, right? Then if you do define testing, and let's just copy render template, make a new HTML file, right? So let's do testing.html. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to go to templates, new file, testing.html. And what we can do is we can actually invoke images, right? So if you type in image source. Now, before we actually do this, we actually need to make another folder, right? So if you make a new folder, static, make sure it's in the web application folder. And inside static, we need to create images, right? So static images, you actually need to do the same structure as I have, or it's not going to work. This is just the thing about Python Flask, that you literally need to follow the structure they have set, otherwise it's not going to work, right? It's a bit stupid, but it's life. What can we do? Then, right, so from static images, then you can literally just put images into your folder. I already have my images. Let me just get them. Right, so I'm just going to basically open the static images, copy my 3 images there, boom. And if I basically put the following URL, static, actually Visual Studio Code actually suggests you, right? So if it displays like this, then you're doing fine. Images kitten.1.jpg. Copy this. I'm just gonna copy this 3 times and just change the URL. Right, so what we can also do is we can specify the size. So if you, for example, do it to 300 by 300 height, right, you can actually see Visual Studio Code is helping you a little bit with this. So let's actually type this in, and if I save this, and if I see on the browser, as you can see, the kitten images are actually displayed right now. Obviously, this is HTML. It's not really related to Python, but it is absolutely related to Flask. Right, as a last episode for this course, I just want to show you guys how to use something called documentation. Documentation is extremely important because without documentation or examples, you're just going to have a harder time programming. Now, before you say this, okay, so people are actually not programmers. They are programmers because programming still requires knowledge on what to do, how to do stuff, and overall experience, right? But documentation is extremely important as it just makes the job so much easier and better. So let's go on Google, and basically if you type in, for example, let's say that I want to put Flask basic authentication, right? And as you can see, we get a documentation right here, right? And as you can see, this literally tells us, not this, there we go, this page. So as you can see, it says installation. So we need to install it with pip. Well, let's do that, right? I'm just going to paste it in terminal. I already have it installed, but let's say that it is installing. So in the meantime, what we can do is we can read the usage, right? Obviously, examples are the best. So in this case, as you can see, this is the code, right? I already have this. So let's actually just import. Let's actually import all of this, right? So I'm just going to paste this here. Basic alf. Okay, that's fine. Let's leave this here. I don't need this. Okay, right. So we already have basically half of the code done. Now let's actually look at the page, right? So we also need to do this, and that is it. Okay, well, let's do that. So let's actually change our credentials first. Let's change our credentials to, for example, admin and password. Now, obviously, whenever you want to put something that is not supposed to be accessed by users, right? And even if you do that, it can still be bypassed. So never think that something is secure. Security doesn't really exist, right? It's not really possible to stop hackers from hacking something. Then if you open up the browser, technically that's all done. Now we just need to put @basic_alf required, right? So let's actually do that. So let's just put basic_alf required. Right, so that's technically it. All we need to do now is literally just test the website. So let's go on my website. Right, if I go to the URL, as you can see, there is no authentication here. But if I go to /testing, then I get asked for the credentials. Now, obviously, if I put something fake, it doesn't work. If I put the correct credentials, it works. Doesn't even work. That's interesting. Oh, because I put a space there. There we go. Let's check admin password. And as you can see, it is working. Now, as I said, you should never really trust blindly these things because, as I said, nothing is secure. Now, obviously, I'm not going to run here. I'm going to try to bypass this, but one of the bypasses that you can really do for these URLs is either try to put a / at the end, or what you could try to do is fuzz for another file, right? So if I put another file after testing, then you'll be basically able to access something behind the panel usually. Right, and that'll be it for this course or this episode, whatever you really want to call this. I hope you guys enjoyed. I tried to share the most important lessons in programming, and if you have any questions, please comment down below. If you would like to share this content with your friends or people that are trying to learn programming, that would be great. Also, don't forget to check my other content on my channel. Thank you for watching and peace.